So you get a little glimpse of what it's like to be blind, and now you see. But I show this mainly to give you a little glimpse of the joy and the excitement that should take place when someone who was blind can now see. And actually, I watched that a couple of times. I had a couple of different videos. I wasn't going to show that one because I thought there was something was wrong with the video. Those first 2 or 3 children, they had those, it was like 3 columns, and I finally realized those 2 outside columns are what they were seeing, the blurriness that they were going through. There's also many videos out there of children who are here for the first time. And it's just interesting if you listen closely to that. It was amazing to see the looks on the children's faces and their smiles, but also what was going on behind them with their parents or the doctors, and celebrating and laughing, and in some cases crying. So you would think that when Jesus, in the story that John read, you would think that when Jesus healed the blind man, the man who was born blind, there would be this huge joy and celebration in the city of Jerusalem. Not the case. This story is the 6th of the 7th miracles that are recorded in the Gospel of St. John. And John actually calls them signs, not miracles, because he wants the readers to know that they're pointing to something, pointing to the kingdom of God. And so these 7 miracles are signs, or Jesus turning water into wine, and we talked about that a few weeks ago. And then he did a couple of healings, healing of the paralytic, and then he fed the 5,000, and he walked on water, and today's the healing of the blind man from birth. And next week, John's going to talk to you about the last of the signs or the miracles, the raising of Lazarus from the dead. So in all of these miracles, you would expect celebration and excitement. People were changed. Next week, you'll see someone's brought back to life. And for this man in the story, it was the first time in his life that he could see colors, and that he could see people, and that he could see faces of people and the expressions that went on their faces. And it's the first time in his life that he understood what someone meant when they said, "That's a beautiful sunset," or "The stars are just glowing." But there was not any joy amongst the religious leaders when the man was healed. You see, it took place on the Sabbath. And their law was very clear that there was to be 0 work that took place on the Sabbath. And actually, this is the 3rd commandment of the 10 commandments, which said, "Keep the Sabbath holy." And God gave it for the purpose of worshiping on that day and resting and building a relationship with God. But the religious authorities, they put these huge restrictions on this law and all the laws. And it's listed as, on this day there shall be no burdens. And then they went on to define what burdens were. And one of them was, do not lift paper. And another one was the weirdest, do not lift animal hair. There was no running, there was no sweating on this day, let alone someone taking dirt and mixing it with spit or saliva, which Jesus did, and then putting it on someone's eyes to heal him so that he might see. That was against the law. Wait till tomorrow. It was work. And according to the Pharisees, they broke the law. More of a reason not to trust Jesus. Now, we didn't read the whole story this morning. It's actually takes up the whole 9th chapter of St. John. It's like 41 or 45 verses. It's just quite lengthy, but we just read the story of the healing. But when the story goes on, surprisingly, this huge conflict arose. The Pharisees, they started debating back and forth amongst each other when this man was able to now see. And they're saying, he healed on the Sabbath, he broke the law. And then this blind man's neighbors started to talk. And they said, isn't this the man that was a beggar? And then others said, no, he wasn't a beggar. So there was actually like a little conflict and a little chaos that was arising amongst the neighbors. And that was forbidden in society. So the Pharisees brought this man back to them, this man who was born blind, who's now seeing, and they wanted details. They wanted details about the Sabbath. And they wanted details about the mud and how he made the mud. And they wanted to learn as much as they could about Jesus so that they could use that against him. But the healed man, in the midst of all of this, said, I can see. I was born blind, and I can now see. And actually, they didn't believe him. And so they go to his parents to find out more. And they started interrogating the man's parents. And they said, was your son really born blind? And his parents were wise. They were smart. They said they didn't want to be triangled in this. So they said, go talk to him. He's old enough. He's an adult. And all the while that all of this is going on, the former blind man is spending the first day of his life seeing people. And as I said earlier, faces and colors. And we find even the disciples kind of get wrapped up into this trap of the Pharisees. And the disciples, they're questioning, who sinned? This man or his parents to make him? And the blind man all along is saying, I can see. And he's not letting any of this outside static get in the way of his new life. And so this man is now living this new life, so the Pharisees call him back a second time after talking to his parents, and they said to him, do you know that the man who healed you is a sinner? He healed on the Sabbath. And his response, and he said this 3 times in the story, I can see. And he said, I don't know if Jesus is a sinner, but there's one thing I do know. I was blind, and now I can see. And it's almost like the Scripture very seldom repeats things 3 times. But it's almost like the man is kind of saying, you don't get it. Focus, focus. Look at my eyes. I was blind, and I never saw anything in my life. Now I see. You get it? And all the while, the authorities are trying to pick this miracle apart. And the blind man, he sticks to this one statement. I was once blind, and now I see. And they end up casting him out. but he could see. And all the while, Jesus, as all this is going on, this may have taken place 2-3 days period of time. But as soon as the story's over with, in the next verse, it says, Jesus is listening to all of this. And I'm sure he's wondering if they would ever realize that this man is seeing and his life is changed forever, and Jesus could do that for them as well. But they were so wrapped up in the rules and the traditions and everything that was going on that the healing of people and the miracle is just overlooked. Now, go back to that video with me for a moment, where these children are seeing for the first time. And whether it's in the past had been total darkness or whether it had been blurriness, and you saw the looks on those children's faces as they put on the glasses. There were little smiles, there was some laughing and crying in the background from the parents and the doctors. So you know that scene and what's going on. But imagine when that happened, someone saying, "Did the FDA approve this?" Or, "How much is this going to cost?" Or worse yet, and I've heard this over the years, where someone would say, "What did their parents do to cause this?" Sometimes in life, we get so wrapped up in the static and the rules that we don't see who Jesus is and what he has done for us and how much different our lives could be. One of my favorite stories in the Bible is found in the Gospel of St. Mark, where Jesus sets the disciples up. And it's one of the first occasions that he has alone with the disciples, and he took them out in a boat. He said, "Let's go out on the sea." So Jesus and the disciples, they go out in this boat, and this storm comes about. And the story is very detailed, that the wind starts to blow, and the waves are overcoming the boat enough for it to start sinking, and they start panicking. And all the while, Jesus is sitting right there, as he is in our lives. And he was asleep. That's a little odd part of the story, but he wakes up and he stills the storm, and he says, "Where is your faith?" And you wonder sometimes if God is looking down on our earth at you and me as we get focused on the darkness and the negativity and the guilt that we carry with us, and sometimes our hopelessness, and we allow those things to direct our lives. But you wonder if God is just saying simply, in the midst of all that, "My son Jesus rose from the dead." Are you getting that? And those are kind of our Good Friday moments in our lives. And it was on Good Friday that the Pharisees, they celebrated. And it was on Good Friday that Jesus' mother was crying more than she probably ever did in her life. It was on Good Friday that the disciples went off and hid. It was on Good Friday that Jesus was beaten and put into a tomb. But it's only Friday. And little did all of those people know what was in store for them and for the world on Easter morning. Or it's when we get overwhelmed with sin and the pace of life and all the stuff that we just can't seem to get past, which become our own personal Good Fridays. And God is saying to us, Easter morning. And we get wrapped up in the Good Friday attitudes and the hopelessness and especially the no change in our lives when things are just going the way we don't want them to go and it's not changing. And God reminds us it's only Friday. Sunday is coming. If you find yourself living in hopeless Fridays, or the times of your lives where you feel like you can't see, when the world seems to be winning, know that there's more to the story. And God has created an abundant life for you and me. He's given us everything so that we might live the Easter life that He's called us to live.